I'm glad you said that there, buddy.
All right, welcome to the MSP Initiative Live. We are live. Beautiful. All
I
right.
don't know if we're beautiful, but we're at least live.
Yeah, we're live and in Technicolor. There we go.
I think you would say technically colored.
Oh man, I'm on old school Technicolor. I like it.
Technicolor.
All right. Cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Thursday edition of the MSP Initiative Live. If you've been following us, we said we'd have a special guest. Well, this time he's here at the start of the show, Mr. Matt Lee from PAX 8.
Wait, I thought I was a special guest.
Well, you're always a special guest. This is the extra surprise special guest.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So of course we have Kenny P, you know, the second arm of the brain trust here for MSP Initiative Live. So we're coming live from Scottsdale, Arizona?
Scottsdale, Arizona, Wichita.
Yeah, we're at the Wichita Casino and Resort. You've heard us plug the big conference, and that's more or less where we're at right now. It's kind of like their first kind of pre-day. The conference actually starts later on this evening. So, you know, lots of drive time over the last 2 weeks, you know, with the Channel Strong Tour. If you're not joining us here in Scottsdale, we have one more stop left, which is in Denver tomorrow. So if you're into Colorado, Denver-ish, can get in your car, drive, join us type area, we'd love to see you.
We don't mind if you fly.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some people that are flying.
Skateboard, you bicycle. We're not trying to be.
No, there are some, we know of people that are flying.
Yes, actually, we do have someone flying in.
That's right. So that's not that's a real thing.
Right. 100%.
Exactly right. So obviously, you know, if you're in the area, please join us in Denver area. Of course, some housekeeping that we always cover and just knock it off. So at mspinitiative.com under sessions, this session, every other session we do will be presented. The ones from the road are a little bit delayed, but should be up probably by next week by latest. So sorry for the delay. Obviously we, you know, Channel Strong we talked about. And then lastly is our monthly, you know, 10 vendor prize giveaway to, you know, any MSP that throws their name in the hat, right? It's kind of our gift to you, but you must enter to win, but you don't have to buy anything, right? Just got to throw your name in the hat, and hopefully you get picked, you know, randomly, right? And some vendor gives you one of 10 cool prizes. It's kind of a no-brainer. So there's all of that. Today we want to talk about, you know, basically current events, right? There's a lot of chatter, right? Here at Taylor Business Group. There's just a lot of really smart, mature MSPs, right? So we've heard a lot of different topics of conversation, and it's interesting how things progress over time. So we'll get into that a little bit today. But since we have Matt Lee, and if you watched the last episode, I canned a couple of things at the end saying, hey, we're going to wait till Matt's on the line, and then we're going to see if we can ask Mr. Security himself. So
Is beard grooming going to be on the list?
beard grooming is like, you
I
gotta,
got some
it's-
tips.
no.
I got some tips.
No. When we're talking about that, you need to be here, right? That's an in-person conversation.
Sure.
Like,
sure.
you know, you can't like, that's where you gotta pay a little bit of tax.
Can't publish that to the world.
That's behind the paywall.
Exactly.
So she said.
Exactly. You want to talk about beard grooming, you gotta be there in person, sorry.
That makes sense.
So there's that. So Matt, a couple of things that came out, you know, going into last week, but I'm gonna bring them up now. So there was an article published by multiple parties, including CRN and others, that the FBI in the Kaseya incident withheld the decryption keys for 3 or 4 weeks longer, I guess, with the, you know, at least as it's written, with the idea that they could potentially catch some of the bad guys. I believe there was a congressional hearing where the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, had to try and answer some questions about, hey, this is a huge business impact, like why? And there really was kind of not very good.
The between the lines that my friends and I could come up with.
Okay.
Okay, and this is the narrative that we're kind of living in our head.
Okay.
If you have access to a threat actor system in such a capacitance that you can extract a master key, you would not want to tip that hand if you were also trying to find and prosecute those threat actors, which means this could also explain why the massive NDA from Kaseya. This could explain why they could not release information about it. You weren't allowed to talk about it. You weren't allowed to say anything about it. because they had access. Now, I did a write-up on this, surprise, surprise, and I actually wrote out the threat actors incident response plan. And I want to touch on the irony that our threat actors actually seem to have had an incident response plan.
So the people who did the bad stuff
Yeah,
actually had the plan, but the people who got hit maybe didn't.
yeah, so here's what happened. We just noticed the FBI is in our systems. Let's go ahead and pull access to our systems, July 13th. They pulled access. They then began to do some investigation after they got their containment in by taking their systems and sites and all things down. And then they said, all right, let's look and see if we can figure out how they got in. Let's see if we can harden our infrastructure. Let's see if we can fix the problems. Let's recover to a known good state. And then sometime late August, I reported on it, the Happy blog came back. Their infrastructure came back up because they finished, they had recovered. They were now restoring operations. And the point is that I think what actually happened, and the reason the FBI didn't tip the hat, was that they knew they couldn't say we're in their infrastructure. Now, I think we probably gained valuable intelligence from that, whether or not that comes to light any time that we can do anything about it or not, or no at this point, I suppose. But I do believe that that's my narrative as to what's happened. That it came from a group thought conversation around a few CISOs, one of those being Ryan Weeks. And so I did tag him in that write-up. But yeah, it was a very interesting thing. And I think the problem you live with is there was real business impact in that delay.
Right.
So
Like
yeah,
to the tunes of comma zeros and a
Yeah,
whole lot of other
extra
frustrations.
commas. The challenge you have to say is we also have no deterrent to ransomware today. We also are finally seeing this nascence of, people finding cryptocurrency places that they just sanctioned. I would wager that it's somewhat related through the DOJ just recently. And I think that those are the type of things where we're trying to make an impact in the threat actors' lives. We're trying to make it feel bad for them. And I think the challenge is we're kind of that laughable high school team that's coming to play the Eagles, right? Like it's great, but they got to play down sometimes. It makes them feel. But the point is, yeah, that's a good topic. I think, it's a greater good conversation in their head, and I think whether they're right or wrong, I'd hate to have to make that choice myself. But
Okay, so I guess the moral to this story is still, hey, don't be in that position, but ultimately you can't just rely on the government.
yeah,
That can't be your only plan, right?
yeah, but in this instance, we apparently took a very offensive tactic, breached their systems in ways that we were able to extract a key that actually, if you took this millions and said, wait a minute, let's look at what we lost, we got a key that works for every single infection prior to July 13th, 2021.
Right.
That impact for someone, depending on whether they've died or not yet, depending on whether they've actually sat there and suffered long enough without that data, that there's no more economic value in it. But I would say that we've probably made a big impact in that direction too, just in getting that key. Now, the argument is they had that key almost instantly. The rest of that time was probably enumeration and trying to figure out if they can get more and get deeper, lateralizations, those type of things.
Well, so
My opinion.
okay.
Yeah.
So big picture though, it brings a lot of people were really vocal about the NDA part, right?
Yeah, man.
And that really didn't come off as a great look to a lot of people from a Kaseya standpoint, but now we're hearing a little bit different about the reality that
Maybe it was from the feds because they're the ones that gave them the key,
wow.
So
Wow. Okay. So another big interesting insurance thing happened or security.
Allstate maybe?
Yeah, another big insurance thing from a security standpoint. So Allstate sends out a notice to all of their
Agent subsidiaries, essentially.
which is thousands of locations,
Yep.
right? And basically said, hey, if you're on Datto RMM, Kaseya RMM, SolarWinds, RMM, whatever, interesting, there were a couple left out, but okay.
Yep.
You need to immediately remove them now.
Yeah.
And basically they're saying you just can't run on them.
Yeah. I mean, I think, let's zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
The overall totality is we all, as a nation, should be struggling with the supply chain challenge. We should be.
Okay.
We should be assessing it. We should be talking about it. We should be living it. We should be making decisions as a business. I would say that at Iconic IT, on my assets, I did not have an RMM. I didn't, because I didn't want to expose the supply chain risk
Sure.
to my assets.
Yep.
And so I'll be honest with you, I don't disagree with him in empirically. I would say if you have one giant platform, let's say it's Google and Google Chromebooks, or let's say it's AWS and whatever that magically becomes for the hardware side. Let's say it's Microsoft and Intune and AADJ and the things that I'm quite familiar with. I was able to do all those things in one platform system. Do I still have supply chain risk? I absolutely do. I've just chosen to limit that, right? And if I can reduce the number of those variables, then I'm going to limit that. Now, as to Allstate, I think they're probably being a little bit heavy-handed, but maybe their infrastructure already can support it. What it sounds like to me is it cannot, because you wouldn't have agents going to myriad of different consumerships around MSPs and support. And so I wager there's no centric support, and they're simply just throwing darts at how to reduce the supply chain risk. I don't think they know anything about this MSP's RMM over that one. I think they just only had heard about these 5, right? Or whatever, or 3, then said, oh, that's the ones, can't use them. I would imagine if they see the backlash, they'll probably add to them. But do I think it's a good idea? I think that a more unified and higher strategy has to be taken, that removing the RMM may produce more harm than good in most cases.
But I mean, listen, there's other software platforms out there that aren't called RMM that do exactly what the RMM does. I mean, use a LogMeIn, for example. LogMeIn has been traditionally a remote access tool, right? Just screen, remote screen. Yep. But there is RMM capabilities built into just the basic LogMeIn remote access, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like WebRoot, had an issue a while back where they could deploy. Like, there's a lot of software out there that have RMM style capability that aren't called RMM. And you mentioned Intune, right? Even Microsoft some tools. So like, it sounds like they're like, what is the strategy behind, hey, we're going to target these
platforms? It's a strategy.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I didn't have this firsthand knowledge, but I'm in a group of trusted security professionals that we have a fairly interesting anonymous group there. But someone piped up and said, Allstate even in the 90s was draconic about their internal policies around what people consume, how they get support, how they do things. And so I would wager this is just another in that line. What it might tell me if I was thinking about it is, even if they're making dumb decisions towards some business objective or saying a shot fired out for the remove RMMs, that thought process probably does reduce the risk. That thought process that they're going through and have gone through.
But isn't the fear now, now they've created this, I don't know if it's a legitimate or illegitimate kind of panic, right? Now the person sitting in MSP.
Well, CISA started this. Let's just step back.
Okay.
CISA absolutely 2 or 3 weeks ago put out a bulletin that basically, it may not even be that long, road time gets long, right? But a while back, CISA released a bulletin saying, listen, your managed service providers, maybe they're not a good idea. And so if you start looking at that, and I'm summarizing, but if you start looking at that, if I'm Allstate's guy or gal, and I'm sitting there running my world and I read CISA's directive, I'm very defensible in taking CISA's advice, right? And I think what MSPs and a lot of security professionals need to make a transition to is, I'm going to say this, and it may sound shocking, we're not here to protect the client's network. Oh, yeah, we are. But we're really actually here to make sure that we're defensible in the way we chose to protect that client's network, that we're following some guidance that's outside ourselves, that we're not shooting from the hip. If that's the CIS controls and we align with them and we do our due care, and we do the best we can as we look at them and we iterate and do better as we go through and assess the program, we're very defensible in our actions. And if we lose, much like a coach in football that loses with a great team, they worked hard, they did it, and they just got beat, it's not the end of the world. You don't get replaced. It's not gone right away. You've done your due care. You've been a good coach. You've educated. You've replaced players. You've done those things. We're not even coaching. We're not even putting 7 men on the field, right? We got to have 11 to even start. And if that guard keeps getting killed on defense, that linebacker has to come up and cover. We've got challenges with our corner. We've got challenges with safeties, and we now have a long risk. If I don't do something to replace that guard so he's not getting beat all the time, I'm not a good coach. And here we are as businesses throwing out 3 tools that we shot from the hip and said, boy, if I use this, this, and this, I'm good. That's my stack. What's a fucking stack? At the end of the day, it has to be aligned with something defensible, something that I can say, I'm not the smartest man. I'm not the smartest guy or gal in the room. I'm just following the best practices that are out there. And so back to my point, if CISA comes out and I'm a good CISO, and I see this directive that says don't use MSPs, I'm going to start working towards not using MSPs because it's defensible.
I'm going to argue and say that there's going to be that messaging deserves pushback.
Fair.
I mean, this is an industry. It's legit. I'm not saying everybody's
Oh, I'm not saying the CISA directive is accurate. I'm saying if I am the director of Allstate and I'm making a decision and it's based off a CISA directive or a CISA bulletin, I could defend that to my bosses and to my
Yeah, but
boards.
George's point is going a little bit deeper.
George always goes.
The mere mention of what they're saying is taking a whole entire industry and saying,
100%.
don't use them.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, I would say that we should push back on that messaging.
I think we should push back on being accountable so that we can stay in the fight. If you took the bell curve of MSPs that are saying, boy, I should figure out security. Boy, that'd be a good. Yes, you shouldn't use that person. I'm sorry. If I was looking at risk, I would tell my son or daughter not to play with that kid in the playground because you probably will get shanked once or twice. Right? I mean, that's the reality. I was looking at you, Ken.
I know you were looking at me. One time I pushed you down the playground.
I know, it happened. It happened.
So
We have to get better.
back to the insurance factor, and this kind of falls along with what I just said with pushback. I think there's a fear out there where if the insurance vendor themselves are saying this internally, when does this flip into the, hey, the end user can't get a policy if their MSP is using these products? I mean, is it that?
Well, I would imagine they're pretty separated.
No, but there's already,
Yeah.
as you were going through this, I was thinking about this. We talked about this before in Massachusetts, I think, and I think it's other states as well. They already have a clause in the insurance policy that says you have to have some kind of managed services, showing that you're trying to protect yourself.
Sure.
So they have that, but then the very same insurance company tells you don't go, where are they going to get this stuff?
Well, and they're not saying don't use a managed service in these Allstate situations. They're saying don't let that managed service put this RMM tool on your system. And I think the point
That's
is
the
that
whole managed in the service.
I could go use Intune without ever binding them to ADJ and still accomplish those same goals. And to George's point, I could add one that they've approved and use LogMeIn or use whatever and add those pieces. And I think what I'm getting at is we have to be able to iterate and change as the market conditions change. And MSPs that are saying they're assaulting MSPs because I can't use RMM haven't realized that maybe there's time to think about my RMM.
But the other challenge from a business level is, what if the MSPs in a terms of agreement, right? They had no idea that,
agreed.
and now they're like, well,
Yeah.
the vendor's not letting me out. I'm in a contract, and then now my customer's telling me to remove it, and now I'm doubling down because I got to move to something else, and now I'm paying two vendors.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a great story.
No, and this is one of those things where you might imagine a world where because a certain vendor could not get rid of their technical debt and has not assessed their supply chain risks and has not been able to protect themselves because they've had an immature consumer that has not been able to see that these technical debts exist. And when people have raised their hand and said those things, people have gotten their hands slapped. And people have gotten in lawsuits. People have been threatened with legal action. People have been in these situations where people trying to get helped and the vendors trying to grow past these technical objectives and get better. Now, I'm not saying that this is on all these vendors. I'm just saying that we do all have to be better, Pax8 included, right? I mean, we had our own moments on things that probably were bad decisions. We have to grow from those. But these vendors that are in that situation may not be able to enforce some of those contracts if their product's not usable. If the general market has made it to where you can't use this in regulatory environments, you can't use this in regular business environments, you're going to invalidate somebody's insurance if you use it. I'm not a lawyer. You'd have to bring Brad Gross on. To
I may do another Matt Lee, Brad Gross session.
And we might have to get the band back together. But
I mean,
I do think that this is a fluid situation. I think if we're smart, we look at this as a beacon of the things that we need to start working on. As MSPs, as vendors making these products, they should be lobbying and talking about the things they're changing and how they're protecting against supply chain and how they become better. But that doesn't mean they also have to become better. They have to start doing code signing. They can't keep doing these giant open things that say, let this run whenever it wants to. They can't leave legacy things in their product because they don't want to overcome the technical debt, right? There's certain vendors out there right now that have Chrome 57 binaries in their applications, Chrome 79 binaries in their applications. Those are things that if I was being a threat actor, I would definitely use to privilege escalate, to attack once I gain access. And I'm just saying, this is the first shot, and actually it's the third shot, right? Because last year it was to review your MSAs, review your MSAs, review your MSAs. If we don't start changing as an industry, and we are, I do believe we are. I think I've seen vendors everywhere. Datto's done a great job to call out somebody that specifically I've seen take the helm and go forward in their security posture. But I would say, my hope is that we take this as a call to action to continue to find some defensibility in our world. CIS is the most logical mapping. NIST, if you so choose, heck, pick a flavor, it doesn't matter. Do the things they suggest and you'll remove 85% of the risk.
Okay,
So
85%.
the bell curve, baby,
Wow,
the bell curve.
wow. Okay,
I mean, remember, 97% of all statistics are made up 75% of the time on the spot.
yeah.
But that said, 85%.
Everybody catch that? 85%, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so one last thing that's worth, excuse me, bringing up, just because it's kind of current events, is actually earlier, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, there were 2 UK VoIP companies that were DDoS attacked. And then for the last, 7 or 8 days, kind of a low cost, no frills, kind of lower end, in my opinion, option. Again, not trying to knock at someone, but VoIP.ms is still down. And apparently, I don't know if it's a, kind of copycat or if they are legitimately the people that we all, re-evil or whatever, but like, apparently this is actually, like another angle at like an extortion ransomware type thing.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with this one. I mean, I've seen the Cloudflare stuff they've been stopping and the Merari takedown that was last week, but I know that we've seen a lot of DDoS. At least I, anecdotally have been seeing a lot of DDoS type stuff, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's another business model, right? I mean, that totally makes sense. Somebody got a promotion at dark side.
Well, this particular, is this actually keeping their phone systems down?
No, not, they can't even call forward.
Yeah,
Like there's
Right,
just
so
stuff.
they've been completely down this whole time.
Yeah.
Correct.
but in the same breath, you would argue, as we talk about this, Cloudflare did stop some massive DDoSes, and had they been consuming those services as at added cost?
I'm not sure you can do Cloudflare type services for
Yeah,
VoIP.
yeah, for
Right.
because it's real
Like
time.
maybe the
protocol.
portals,
Yeah,
but from
The
the actual
operational
traffic
technology.
transit, I don't think you can do it.
that's smart then. I mean, that is smart.
No, but like you still can have DDoS protection at the data center level,
Yeah.
right? Like this is where, when you choose where you park your traffic, this is one of those conversations where you're like,
Yeah.
how much DDoS protection do I have? Is there ability to buy more? Like, how does it get
Right.
turned on? Like, I feel like people forget, like, it's kind of an older school model, but here we are.
Yeah, and I'm not, I've never been heavy in the VoIP and points of presence and protecting how that network functions, but I would say that, if you look at some of the other communications models that aren't PSTN, that aren't your traditional VoIP, those kind of blend in with traditional traffic and are harder to DDoS in the same way. So,
Well, what VoIP.ms did was they, obviously have to do everything via FQDN, which obviously makes sense. And then when their FQDNs were getting hit, they said to flip to the IPs, but then the bad guys saw the message flip to the IPs and they started hammering the IPs.
Right.
And then, now there's still no ETA, and I know a lot of people have been able to successfully port their numbers out because there's an upstream carrier, but.
I actually am not familiar enough with this one.
Okay.
I'd be curious as to why they don't have some method to black hole that traffic. And I'm just not familiar.
Well, I mean, other than if they have so much bot networks and they have all these computers that are infiltrated, they may literally not have enough DDoS capacity
Yeah.
to handle terabytes of,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I wish I was smarter on this one, but you caught me on a weak area.
Yeah.
This is a 10% knowledge space.
Okay, so I'm
George
gonna,
has to check that box now.
He should. He's done it to me before. Hey, man, I'd rather just be honest about the things I got.
hey,
gaps
that's
in.
okay, we said, hey, we're gonna just
Yeah,
throw it
yeah.
out there and see what happens. So our friend Darren, who is one of those people that may like to be on planes a lot, he actually chimed in from the last topic we were on, just about, the MSPs and, hey, you need to be not part of the 80 to 20%, you need to be part of the 80% kind of thing. So he chimes in on chat and says, it's there. Some have said it's inevitable that there will be some kind of certification for MSPs to weed out those who are not taking security seriously. But wouldn't all who pass that test and advertise it immediately make themselves the ripest possible target to be exploited?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But in the same breath, you're a target now, it's just not as, filtered of a pool. But I think to the original point, one of the challenges in our industry is that, and let's take it to Brad Gross, for example. Brad Gross had to go to school in most states. There are 2 states where you do not, I think.
3 states.
3 states, thank you.
There's 3 states where so just to clarify, me and Matt had a little bit of this conversation in a parking lot not so long ago. And I was reminding Matt, or just maybe schooling him on, hey, out of the 50 states here in the United States, there are 3 states
Yeah.
where you do not have to go to law school
100%.
and you can still take the bar
But
exam.
the point is,
Yeah.
you finished it with the correct statement of, they then have to take a bar exam.
Correct.
But not only that, they also have to stand by the rules of the bar. They also have to have the ethics of the bar. And if those are ever disproven, they're gone. There are real consequences to that. I'll pass you back to my Series 7. Before I could make a stock trade at 19 years old, I had to study. I had to pass a test. I had to prove I could do it. And then after that, I had ethics that I had to follow. I had compliance departments. I had these things ingrained and inherent in the world, which meant if FINRA decided something I was doing, something we were doing, or something that needed to be changed in the regulations needed to happen, I would be apprised of them. I would take training on those, and I'd have to follow them. And if they didn't get it to me in the right way and I did it anyway, I still lost my license. Same thing as an attorney. The point is that having no barrier to entry not only makes it to where you have, a mixed bag of capabilities, but it also makes it to where there's no kind of correction methodology in the system to say, no, you can't keep fucking saying that. That's not true. You can't tell your clients that. That's bad ethics. You can't say that if I take you out of this life insurance policy when your age of the insured was 27 years ago versus now when you have diabetes and you're 27 years older, I'm doing you a good service. I'm sorry, but I'm saying that I would have made an extra $9,000, so I had to do it. I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to feed my family. Doesn't fucking work there.
Right.
And the challenge is that we have an industry that is so supportive and so enabling and so empowering to small to mid-sized business, but it is also the axe that it absolutely swings at their neck. And the challenge is that if we don't regulate that, if we don't find some way to do it, which will screw it up, we'll make it much worse. It's going to be harder than an attorney. Attorneys, by the time they had these type of laws, have been doing the type of legal work in the Napoleonic and also the English legal methodologies for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. We invented technology in the 50s, 40s, when it first became somewhat prevalent in the government space. And now in the consumer space, it just accelerates like that over 60, 70 years. The challenge is that if we don't have some barriers to entry, the people that turn the wrenches, that design the software, there probably should even be acceptable code review things that exist as a company making any piece of shit software. There absolutely should be changes in our industry. It's like the Industrial Revolution, right? We made machinery, we made steam engines, we made all kinds of stuff. And until we locked 100 women in a sewing room and let them burn to death so that we didn't impede on their break, we didn't figure out labor law changes and safety changes. And we didn't put up fences and scaffolding. You just hung on the steel. And we didn't have belts on until people started dying. People are dying. MSPs, software vendors, all of us have to be better. There's a new standard, just like there was then. It didn't take away business profits. If anything, it soared.
So then the question is, technically the bar exam was written by the Bar Association in each state. The state didn't create that test.
Right.
The group of attorneys that came together.
Same thing with
created.
self-regulatory.
So who's creating the test?
Yeah, I think you have certain people, I've met them, MSPs, vendors that truly, truly get it. And I think that if you allow, and how do you define that? Well, there's very nice things called frameworks. They're these neat things that intelligent people design. They have ISACs, they share data, they learn about it, they change it. It's amazing. And if you align with those, and then you make sure people understand them, people can execute them, they show the working knowledge of it, whether you make it a tradescraft type or whatever, you make it to where at least you have some standard and some corrective ability to say, if these 18 change and now you need to do number 19, how long can you, until you can get 19 in, is all about operational maturity. It's all the things that are going to come with that. And I think that is my opinion.
But hold on, Matt. There could be a rabbit hole here too.
Always is.
Right? Like for years, you heard of the larger company saying, it's not worth it to build something on your own. We already have it, come over here, just swipe the credit card because you're never gonna be able to keep up with it. I'm starting to hear some murmuring of people who are like, hey, we have some DevOps guys in-house. We'll just build it our own. And I'm like, are you now going down a very potentially bad path?
The future is code. The future is APIs. The future is the connectivity of services through stated and delivered things, right? And so I'm not going to dispel and say that no MSPs should develop their own code. What I'm saying is you should hire people with the right price to have the DevSecOps capabilities. You should fund it well enough, and you should understand what you're taking on.
I mean, but you know that.
I mean, I could start a truck by laying a jack handle over the negative terminals and pushing the bumpers together, right? Or positive terminals, but that's not the right way.
But my point to you is, we've all talked to people on both sides of the aisle. when you go down these roads, it's never the amount of time that you forecasted. It's always triple. It's like a construction project. Oh, there was rain, there was this, there's that. And then all of a sudden, a year later, right, it's not done. So I almost caution people to say, well, wait a minute, you better be, like, you're like, oh, if you don't trust the bigs, you think you can do it better. I think that's not the, you shouldn't take that thought lightly, right?
Oh, that's a fair statement. Yeah, I don't think you walk into it lightly, but I think if you start seeing the size and scale of certain MSPs, and you start saying, okay, like, I don't want to name any names, but like, they're starting to get to where there's enough scale that you could have a 7-person sprint team with a leader that's doing it, and DevSecOps and CI/CD pipelines. You have, continuous integration. And I think if you start thinking through actually what should happen, modern software vendors are doing this. One of the things that attracted me to Pax8 is that we're already going from monolithic application to container and microservices. Guess what's next? Now microsegmentation, right? Microservices means you're taking those and breaking them into little tiny pieces so that you can work on this when it needs fixing without taking this out and breaking it.
So let's roll back to the beginning of all this. If it were you, if you were in charge of this whole entire thing, where would we start? Because that seems to be the biggest problem. No one knows where to start, right? We all talk about it. We should do this. We should do this. If it were up to you, Matt, and this was all under your control, how would you start the process to get to that?
I would probably fund and help fund a vendor or non-vendor owned, but MSP owned.
A Switzerland company.
Right.
Yeah, but an MSP owned entity that is to be the regulatory body. And I think what you do is have MSPs that get it, that understand it, that are starting to drive this already. I could name 5, 6 of them if I was trying to, I don't want to exclude anyone. But the point is, there's a lot of MSPs that are the ones that could drive this, that could take and say, here's what we're adopting to, here's the stuff we're shooting for. I used to be a big CMMC3 guy, and I think that is great because it's audited, but it also is slow and it's going to take a long time and it's expensive. But what if we just said, here's all the CIS family of controls, and I'm beating on one drum here, and started just saying, we're going to align to these. And then what you start doing is saying, let's talk about the financial practices that need to exist. Let's talk about the operational practices that need to exist as well. And they start to take companies like these TBGs and Taylor Business, people that are already coaching MSPs should all participate in this effort to drive what becomes a regulatory industry. At the very least, you can start having a seal of, hey, at least these people understand it. And these type of MSPs won't talk about protecting you. They won't talk about saying, I'm gonna square you away. This antivirus is the best one ever. I'm gonna ring fence you out of existence. I'm gonna solve all of those things. Are these histrionic horseshit vendor things that exist, and I love all my vendors. But the point is that you have to start talking about how I'm gonna reduce the risk, what it's gonna look like after you get compromised with this in place. What does it change for you in a business option? Was it change in a recovery option? Was it change in a getting back to business? And talking about things in real practice, just like my attorney should with me. Matt, if you take the stand, there's a chance that you might endear the jury and do well, but likely you're a dickhead and you probably won't. You shouldn't take the stand. That's advice. It's real. Here's your impact. Here's your choice. And I think we talk about FUD. I'm not a FUD seller. I won't sell on FUD. The problem is that there isn't FUD. This should be education. This should be collaboration, right? So my thought is you start by getting the like-minded MSPs together to drive that conversation.
But in all reality, we're talking about years. I mean, this thing doesn't happen overnight, so.
Yeah, but I think you already have a bit of a Pareto principle playing out where some of the bigger MSPs that do get this and do understand risk better and have risk officers are starting to say, I don't want to move my $100 million. I don't want to lose that. Let's dedicate some to compliance. Let's dedicate. So I think you have this kind of opportunity, years. No, small MSP can flex on this in like 2 months, right? So if you called to action, people started at least before we even get this group and that stand, just go align to the CIS controls and give yourself defensibility and find gaps. And then next week, look at them and see how did I fail. And next week, look at them and say, how did I fail? And next week, look at them, you might see a pattern here. The point is, it's an iterative process, flex the muscles. If I could just ask everyone to do it, we'd all be safer, right? And the challenge is if you start really assessing, you can't have local admin. It's not possible. It creates too much of a gap.
So,
right? But that's hearts and minds, and people fight it.
so Darren comes back and says,
I like Darren.
oh, he's great. You're gonna see him. You're gonna see him tomorrow, right, Darren? You're gonna see you tomorrow, buddy. He says, I propose we fund research to allow for Matt Lee clones, or at least the AI, or at least the AI versions to be deployed to all MSPs.
I believe John McAfee has already made singularities, so I think that may have happened. We saw him show up on the internet last week, so I'm hoping to dump this into something.
Okay, all right, so, hey, man, it's all good. I could, more than one Matt Lee, be like more than one Kenny P, or
Yeah,
more than
nobody
one
wants
George
that.
Bardissi, I mean,
No,
that's
It's not
crazy.
really what they want.
No, I think the world is only so
Yeah.
big. So, moving on, Ken, we've been, yesterday we had a good chance to talk to a lot of the guys here,
Some really smart MSPs.
that are actually in these peer groups here with
Yeah.
Taylor Business. And I ran into Reed Warren from IT Valuations, which great guy, knows his stuff. Did a bunch of series with Reed in the past under his old company. Obviously we're talking about some new ones. And one of the things I got from him yesterday were, and this falls in line, Ken, with what we were talking about on Tuesday. Hey, let's get together. Let's put a rubber band around it. This isn't working. Now we need to unplug. So we were talking how expensive it is to get to that unplugging.
You might have lost me in that analogy.
Okay, so let's say you had, you're Max MSP, I'm George's MSP. We're
Okay.
like, hey, let's merge.
Okay.
Let's
All right.
merge. Let it be
Unplug
bigger.
meaning let's unmerge.
Right, now it's like, this isn't working. I don't like you anymore. My
Should've known that instead.
my head's shinier than yours. I can't have two shiny guys, bald heads in the same place. We need to disconnect, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting where Reed's like, hey, listen, I've come into these situations where I've had to play mediator, number one, but number two, explain how we get to the number, right? And a real number where it's like, hey, everybody's gonna have to take a hit in order to unplug this, but here's how we get there, kind of thing.
What's funny is there's like a business brokers valuations commission. They used to be, there was I don't know how efficacious they were out across the world, but the reason he's able to say those valuations and come to that point, one string guitar, bro, but is that he has some defensibility in his choices of how he evaluates something based on some guidelines that he can point to and say, I'm not making this shit up. Here's the things I can. We MSPs have those, we just don't use them. We're just not very smart in that way. And
So it reminds, so number one, hearing, we'll bring Reed on, and we'll have, maybe a series, session or two on this, but it's amazing how bitter that can get. And it brings me back to that whole Brad Gross thing. It's like, hey, we all love the good stuff in the beginning, but you should talk about the exit up front so that it simplifies.
Oh, I see you came full circle in my
Yeah.
heart right there, George. You
Yeah.
brought it all the way back to, we should set reasonable expectations.
Right.
We should actually know our subject matter as an expert and be able to make discussions that actually are true and set a real, and I think one of the things you touched on is people don't make decisions on data. They usually make decisions
On
on
emotion.
emotion.
Yeah.
And I think one of the cool things, I was at September, give them a little plug from CSA, so not CIS, sorry. I love you CIS, but I also love CSA too. So I was at CSA last week and we did a tabletop exercise. Everybody's done tabletop exercises. This was put on by Starbucks and their entire security team. So there were 7 of these professionals there. And they had spent 1 man month building this exercise.
Wow.
So they actually put in these releases that describe the emotions that people are going through. They made the executive understand that they cannot get back up and the board's pressuring them. And they're calling you right now. They want this back up. Why are we not in commerce yet? And I don't have any data yet. And they put, I'm getting the tinglies, but they put them through this emotional kind of 3 hours or 2 hours that we went through. And I think I walked out there going, man, I just need to invoke emotion. And people can remember and attach to these things. And that's what I do. That's what I love to do, is tell stories.
But it's interesting, the emotional component is what helps people have that. It's like it's the feeling. The feeling's what helps people connect. But but he made it very clear, Reed, that the people that have their agreements correctly in place for the exit, if something should go bad, obviously makes it a lot easier because now all he has to do is justify the valuation and the rest should kick in. Where it gets hard is the 50-50 and there is no exit
I don't want
realistically.
half of this customer.
Yeah.
We're gonna segment the network.
Yeah.
The VLAN left is you and.
Yeah, not good. So
Wow.
so that was an interesting conversation. The other part of that conversation was, hey, like if he said, if I walk into a peer group and I take all the people around the table and I do rubber band that, and let's say you take individual companies that combined are
Well,
at.
rubber band just sounds so wrong for
Well,
mergers, man. And stuck together with this guy like, yeah.
It's kind of what it is.
No,
He
we're
said,
integrating.
if I took this, he said, if I took, he said, if I took all 10 companies, 12 companies, however many are in the room, I merged them together, and now all of a sudden they're at 60, $70 million in revenue, and all of a sudden, I'm like, but where's the benefit to that? He's like, well, just combining the revenue together
Even multiplier.
takes their multiplier up dramatically higher than if they were on their own.
The challenge is, and I think, we were, when I was at an MSP, obviously, we were a highly integrated merger. So we didn't actually just bucket them together. We actually had operational efficiencies that we gained, a lot of cost. We also had software cost efficiencies that we gained. We also had operational abilities to write a process that could defend in a SOC 2 that I couldn't do if it was 100 companies without lying. And so I think you're right. People that are doing these push togethers and just ruling by EBITDA from the top down have an argument as well, because some of them are seeing the writing on the wall. And I won't say who this one is, but there's one very large one that they're realizing that if they start aggregating the Microsoft side of it, scripting and enabling the Microsoft side of it, while all these other business units didn't convert what they were using and how they were using it, they might have been pre-reading the CISA guidelines around MSPs, and then ultimately the source right now of the supply chain part of those, and saying, no, we'll just universally script from the very top, all Microsoft, everything that's into all these things. And now you start seeing those scale delineations that will mean change of who we employ in an MSP, will mean change in what we need in an MSP, but it'll mean that at a time when good engineers that understand how systems function are being yanked into security every day. Primary security at large companies, which is great.
But
It's a
but
perfect
Matt, we've already
ecosystem.
learned pretty recently, even Microsoft has problems. They had that whole Azure database or Power Apps database
Yeah,
exposure,
we are.
whatever.
It's the wrong narrative. We're always gonna have problems.
Right.
It's how you respond to them, how quickly you fix them, how quickly you find them. This is back to that whole statement of the narrative around security is broken, right? I'll put a perfect example. Give me your address and let me have free will to come do whatever I want negative to you in your house. You can put in locks. You can put in an alarm. You can get a shotgun. You can have dogs. Those are all layers. But if you don't have the shotgun, you don't have the dogs, and you don't have the alarms, and you don't have the locks, then I'm sure shit just gonna turn the handle and come kill you. So the point is that what we're thinking of is sometimes we have false security. Sometimes we have false security in our own homes. We live
Absolutely
thinking
right.
we're safe now because I locked the door. That's not true if a concerted enough actor came after you. And the
I
point
don't-
is,
I don't know. I'm gonna have to start digging. I'm gonna have to do the Bruce Wayne, back to with the clock,
yeah. But I'm just saying,
Give your friend out.
what I'm getting at is we ultimately land on a level of acceptable risk, and some of it we just ignore as humans. And it's the same thing in our businesses, but we're not even putting the locks on. We're not even turning on not doing any of these things. And so we have to start talking in terms of we will fail, we will have an incident. I used to tell people at Iconic, live compromised, right? And my statement was not to say, oh my gosh, we can't win. It was to say, if someone got to this level of access, they got through your front door, will the next step be the alarm going off that wakes me up and lets me grab my shotgun and gets the dogs all pissed off? Or will the next step be an unfettered entrance into my home to a point that I could be harmed? And I think the point is that if we start living compromised, we'll think, how do I segment the data? Do I lock my bedroom door too, so I have an extra 14 seconds? Do I do these things, right? And the point is they make you start assessing. And I'm not saying live paranoid shit in your house, because probably people aren't after you like they are your business, right?
I don't know, man.
Well, I mean, we're buddies. But the point is that I think if we take this to that kind of analogy, we have to change the narrative of what's security. That lock manufacturer doesn't say, this lock right here will stop every mat lead that's coming at your door. No, they just go, here, this is a good lock. Here's its parameters. Here's what its force loads are. Here's what it can take. You can find out research on whether it's pickable in a lot of ways and how easy that is if you really were concerned. But at the end of the day, our vendors are saying, this is the only lock. This one, it's got you. And so the whole narrative around security and security deliveries, it has to change, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, we once again, security is a big part of the conversation. So Matt, you were last week while we were in California and paying very exorbitant gas fees.
$6 a gallon is cheap, right?
I mean, I think our highest was $5.09 for regular,
God.
and I believe premium was $6.89.
Yeah.
So, or no, $5.89. So it was almost Yeah, it's for real. So while we were funding ExxonMobil, you were out in Chicago.
I was.
So
Small
what
prison sentence.
No, you were out at a TechCon Unplugged, right?
Our friend Paco.
How was it?
It was good. I mean, my principal reason for being there was teaching a M365 modern office kind of immersion lab, where I wanted to teach, and not by teach like Microsoft standards, because those guys, they get their books, it's great, it's perfect, but more from an engineer's, this is where I screwed up, this is what bit me, here's what this really means, this is what I've seen this actually do. And walk through Azure Active Directory, AADJ, so joining machines to it, Intune management, or now MIM as they call it, Microsoft Endpoint Management, and what it means to be able to say, if I send that machine a reset command, or someone steals it and puts in a flash drive and reinstalls it with Windows, it's going to suck back into my infrastructure. All my security policies will be applied, my encryption policies will be applied, and more importantly, it's a closed ecosystem at that stage. And so we start seeing this ability to tell a very compliant narrative towards our security choices. We make these CIS controls and say that one of these means I'm going to encrypt my hard drives. That's one thing to say we're going to do that and set up processes. But when you can make an automatic processes, when it just doesn't fail, and if it does fail, it stops its access to the data. If it fails, you have a compliance policy.
I've been hearing this word automatic for 20 years.
It's more automatic than it was 20 years ago, if you recall. So the point is that if you think about,
Does the marketing meet the roadmap?
I think in this case it does. I've used it for four years now. I've been using it
Okay.
since 18. So 3, my math's not great. But in 18, we cut over at Choose Networks to Azure Active Directory and Intune. Now at that time, I used to tell my people, when you live on the bleeding edge of Microsoft, it just means you often bleed. So I did bleed, and they hated me sometimes. But ultimately, we went down a journey where I truly can trust the technology. I've seen it over 500-600 assets, right, in our internal space. I've managed that where I didn't have calls. There's only one reason I can have 170 employees and only one internal IT person that also is responsible for policy, that's also responsible for execution of applications, because it just works. It works systemically or it fails systemically. Right?
Sounds like that was a pretty good crash course.
Yeah, sorry. So it was. We went on for 4.5 hours. My voice got hoarse, right? I know it's hard to believe that I can talk for 4.5 hours, but it's possible. But I showed labs, I showed videos. I'm actually going to be putting that content out on my YouTube channel eventually.
Oh, there's a beard YouTube
Oh, I
channel.
record. Oh, yeah. Yeah. CyberMattLee.com.
CyberMattLee.com.
And then
Everybody write that one down. That might be a good.
Yeah, maybe like bathroom reading, but
Oh,
but I did teach that class. There were 20 very engaged MSPs in that class. 2 of them actually did devices. They were not bound to AD. They were not bound to Azure AD. They were just living on machines. Went through the process, got one ingested into Autopilot, signed into it, brought in policies, applied encryption, and actually saw it work before we wrapped up the conference. So 2 MSPs, I was able to definitely change hearts and create capabilities there. That's my mission, right? I want to give back. That's why.
So for everyone that's going to watch this or maybe watching now who says, where do I go to learn this class? Is there another one?
I'm not doing shameless plugs because there's also a course developed at a place that rhymes with Max 8. But they're going to be teaching a class that's more formal. I'm more of a shotgun immersion. They're going to be walking you through the steps in a better fashion, I think. But short story is I'm literally going to put the whole 4.5 hours on, which isn't the same as a course. I would certainly be willing to do it if there was enough demand to sit back down and go back through it and walk people through. Sometimes people are kinesthetic learners.
Agreed.
I am a kinesthetic learner. I would rather go blow something up 12 times, figure it out, and then move forward than read the manuals, just do RTFM, bad about it. Right?
Manuals?
Yeah, I need to framework it in my head. I need to understand it and be able to rotate it. So in order to do that, I have to play with it.
You don't buy much at IKEA, do you?
No. Yeah, it wouldn't work out. Or I have to have people assemble it on Fiverr or something.
I'm pretty sure nobody's coming from Fiverr to your place. You have to pay for the IKEA professional services.
Yeah.
Or buy it pre-built.
Yeah. Oh, wait. See, I didn't know you had checkbook
I don't
money.
have that.
No, that's where you have to go outside of the.
Oh, I thought you meant there was a way to get my IKEA furniture pre-built.
Yeah, that people do that as a service.
Yeah.
Outside
Okay,
companies.
fair. You can like me.
Yes, so,
As a service.
As a service.
exactly, everything's as a service.
$100 a month and we'll assemble all the furniture. I only buy one piece every 3 years.
So no, it sounds like that was a great class. Sounds like people might be interested in that.
Yep.
So, reach out to the company that rhymes with Max AIDS, and maybe they have something for you. Cool part here, as we're kind of getting towards the end of the show, the cool part here at this event is like these guys, a lot of the guys that are in these
And gals.
that are in these groups, right? These accountability groups, profitability groups, there's a lot of different angles, right? Depending on what you're after. A lot of them have been down the road you're talking about. I've talked to a lot of, a few guys who said, hey, my top line hasn't changed, but my profitability has gone up by, multiples, right? Because all of a sudden they're actually doing things not by hand, which is why I kept on saying automatic. I mean, when you first bought your first PSA or subscribed to your first RMM, this was the message, right? And then a year, 10 years later, you're still, like, this never happened.
In the same breath, you're talking to somebody that we automated away 1,200 man hours, on a pretty easy day.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think you're still talking about no barrier to entry as an MSP, no definition of what skills it takes to deliver these type of things, no understanding of, I'm not being disparaging, I'm just being accurate in the sense that if I want to be a hairdresser, there's an 8-week course. I got to go prove that I cut this hair adequately. I got to prove I can shave a bald head. I got to do these things, right? But you don't have to do that to be an MSP. You just have to get a shingle. In fact, you can just go right on, put it on Sharpie, on sticky note, put it on glass. You're good. MSP number 7. So I'm not hopefully being disparaging, but I'm saying that our industry is broken.
MSP number 7.
Yeah.
1,000.
Yeah, so 70,000.
Yeah, exactly.
The last thing I want to bring up before we wrap up is, and we mentioned this on Tuesday, that Yelp was following all of the small businesses that were on their platform. And they said from March 2020 until now, 60% of those companies have now since gone out of business, which at some point has to
Sounds
ripple
like y'all
back.
bet on the wrong businesses.
Well, I mean,
Sorry.
restaurants and retail location. I mean, basically
It
anything.
still indirectly affects. The
I know, I'm
MSP
being
space, right?
extreme.
No, but it indirectly affects the MSP space. Where George is going is because some of those are people's clients and
True
no
story.
longer exist.
Yeah, true story.
So from an outlook standpoint, we always say that there's a delay before the MSP kind of feels the market conditions.
Yep.
How much of that do you think hurts the guys that you're kind of been talking about this whole time, the bottom 20%, right? Like that's where I think
I don't know that it hurts one more than the other, unless that bottom 20% hasn't added new lines of revenue, increased their offerings so they cover more security, had the conversations to be a more secure MSP, done the point is, if you see this revenue shrinking from losing these small and mid-sized businesses, and that's one vector, right? That's the restaurant industry. That doesn't speak to everything else. There's others that have expanded, other industries. That being said, they've probably also grown revenue in those partners. If you start looking at what you should be doing to actually secure and raise the tide, and let's say you go sit down with your clients on CIS and say, okay, here's the roadmap for security. It's well established. Let's go 1 through 18, talk about it. Oh, you want to add 2 and 6 this quarter? Let's add 2 and 6 this quarter. That's going to be us doing duo for your identity. And I'm actually not correct on the numbers. I haven't memorized 8 yet, but the V8. But the point is that they probably should have expanded their security capabilities and offerings. And I know a great many MSPs that over this pandemic absolutely have. And so I would have to imagine it's a wash. I don't want to speak towards somebody else's pain. I get it, and businesses are dying and MSPs will feel it. But in the same breath, these MSPs need a wake-up call. And if that means we need to thin the field and have less MSPs that figure they owe it to their clients to either have the discussion around security. I think gone are the days where you can say, I'm not an MSSP, so I don't do security. No, you have to be defensible in your actions and how you deliver your service.
Still have to be security focused.
Yeah, 100%.
That doesn't mean that you can't pull the right, outside solutions in and have
True
somebody else
story.
do that part too.
Yeah, 100%. And there's some great ones out there.
Right.
No, 100%. Very excited to see how the rest of this event kind of unwinds.
Yeah.
Starts this evening, right? Kind of welcome reception format type thing.
Yep.
Lots of good conversations in the hallways, and I'm pretty pumped for it. And I was super pumped that I guess I had some temperature shock in prior years in August and September in Arizona here, but it's been
Nice.
actually pretty nice.
Yeah, man.
So I guess we were in the wrong time in the right place. So anyway, definitely gonna do a recap of this, once we're back off the tour and all off the road. But very excited for this. There's only a handful of events before the year ends. And obviously IT Nation seems to be, the last big band standing. Kaseya is out there, but I think most people are targeting that.
I'm going to Sector in Canada.
Are you gonna be able to get through it?
Oh, yeah, man.
I don't know, man.
Just gotta hit with enough nurse.
They don't let me in usually on a good year.
But that has other reasons.
I don't know.
Yeah, send photos, man.
Yeah, no problem. buddy.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
I need proof.
Do we need
Yeah.
to do one of those Apple AirTags?
Yeah.
Can it be deep faked?
Where-
You okay with a deep fake photo?
Where in the world is Matt Lee, right? Remember Carmen San Diego?
Yeah.
100%.
I have been playing around with some cool deep fake software.
Okay,
It's fun. I don't have enough horsepower for the rendering, but.
okay, all right. So thanks for tuning in. Remember Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Again, if you're in the Colorado, Denver area, or you're somebody named Darren and feel like getting on a plane, we'd love to see you too if you're an MSP. So go to mspinitiative.com, click on Channel Strong and put your name in. If you're an MSP, we'll get you there. Otherwise, thanks for watching, everyone, and looking forward to catching up with you next week. Matt, thanks for jumping on, buddy.
Always.
And
Thank you, Matt.
of course, Kenny P, they're always reliable, and we'll catch you guys on the other side.
See y'all.
Take it easy. All right.
So now you gotta walk over and end it.
I gotta walk, well, I could have done it from the cell phone, but hey,
I already saw that screen redraw. so-
Yeah, exactly. Bye.